US Secretary of State John Kerry is holding talks with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov in London. It's the latest attempt to solve the crisis in Ukraine before its southern Crimea region votes in Sunday's referendum on whether to join Russia.
Obviously, we have a lot to talk about. I look forward to an opportunity to dig into the issues and possibilities that we may be able to find about how to move forward together to resolve some of the differences between us. And we look forward, I know, to a good conversation.
The situation is not simple. A lot of things happened. A lot of time has been wasted. But let's see what we can do.
Well, let's get more on those talks from our correspondent Simon McGregor-Wood, who's standing by for us in London. Simon, what is it that they will be trying to work out here? Because it seems the referendum is going to take place on Sunday.
Yes, I think the Americans have exceeded that will probably not be on the agenda, the actual cancellation of this referendum. That would be too much of a climb down for the Russians at this 11th hour. I think they're talking about how to manage the aftermath of the referendum which takes place on Sunday. The West, of course, the Americans in the vanguard, declaring it to be a completely illegal referendum with no standing. What they're talking about, I think, is how to manage the aftermath of that. The Americans still very clearly determined that the Russians should start talking to this new Ukrainian government to recognize it, to allow monitors into Crimea and other parts of Ukraine, and to start talking to the so-called contact group to try and find a diplomatic way to lower the flames, to get Russian troops back into their barracks, and certainly given Russian troop movements in the last 24 hours, to make sure that the Russians don't go for a grab of any other parts of Ukraine.
And there's been a lot of talk so far, hasn't there, Simon, of sanctions, and the German Chancellor yesterday saying that Russia's actions will cause massive economic, political damage. What can the EU, EU or the US do here, the EU especially when they are so reliant on Russia for oil, for gas?
Well, there's a two-step process in the sanctions. It's pretty clear, certainly according to Secretary Kerry speaking in the US Senate yesterday, Thursday, that on Monday, assuming there's no dramatic climb down by the Russians, there will be the imposition of sanctions by both the US and the European Union. In the first phase, they will be so-called targeted sanctions. They are drawing up a list of Russian officials in the security services, in the military, members of parliament who are directly responsible or involved in agitating for this aggressive involvement in Ukraine. And they will be targeted with travel bans and asset freezes. The next phase, I think that's the one that Chancellor Merkel was speaking so passionately about yesterday in Berlin. That's the really difficult situation because that involves, certainly as far as the EU is concerned, completely rethinking the economic relationship between the European Union, the international community and Russia. Yes, there are lots of things to lose on the European Union side. Do you know there are 6,000 German companies operating in Russia? They sell $50 billion worth of goods to the Russians every year, but also the Russians will feel a lot of pain too. They sell gas to Western Europe, but if they don't do that, they have no foreign currency reserves. The ruble has already dropped 11% this year. It'll hurt the Russians a lot as well, so there's much to think about.
Thank you very much for that update, Simon. That's Simon McGregor-Wood joining us from London.